Right now, President Obama announces proposals to reform the NSA surveillance program as he meets the press. We'll have the latest on that. And next, just when you thought it would be a snore of a race, things get heated between Spitzer and Stringer in the fight, and I do mean fight, for New York City Comptroller. And later, does Albany have a women problem? And why can't Democrats gain control of the New York State Senate? Those questions and more as we sit down with Democratic Conference Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Andrew Whitman, in tonight for Richard French, and thank you so much for joining us this Friday evening, August the 9th. President Obama says he stands behind the National Security Agency's surveillance programs. He also says the NSA needs to become more transparent so that the people of the United States and the rest of the world understand that the government, quote, isn't snooping. That was one of many issues that came up during the president's wide-ranging press conference this afternoon. Right out of the gate, President Obama announced a series of reforms for the controversial NSA surveillance program.
We can and must be more transparent.
That includes a civil liberties officer at the NSA, a new high-level commission to review the government's intelligence programs, and coordinating with Congress to review the program that collects telephone records.
It's not enough for me as president to have confidence in these programs. The American people need to have confidence in them as well.
The president insisted the changes would have taken place even if Edward Snowden had not leaked details of those secret programs.
It would have been less exciting. It would not have generated as much press. I actually think we would have gotten to the same place.
But do these surveillance reforms vindicate Snowden?
No, I don't think Mr. Snowden was a patriot.
The president said the NSA leaker had been charged with 3 felonies, and if Snowden thinks he's innocent, he should return to the U.S. and stand trial.
There were other avenues available for somebody whose conscience was stirred and thought that they needed to question government actions.
The White House said Edward Snowden was a factor in the president's decision not to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin next month, but not the only one. Today, the president said it's because the U.S.-Russian agenda has stalled. It's not personal.
I don't have a bad personal relationship with Putin. When we have conversations, they're candid, they're blunt, oftentimes they're constructive.
President Obama now heads off for a week-long summer vacation, but big battles over health care and the budget, of course, are looming in the fall. All right, for more, let's turn to our panel on this. We're joined by O'Brien Murray, Republican strategist who keeps a cot in the studio so he can appear 3 times a week. And Rich Valdez is with us, former Christie administration official and columnist for the Washington Times community section. Gentlemen, welcome. Thanks for being here. It's a panel with 2 Republicans and no Democrats, so maybe not the best day for me to say, you know, normally I trust President Obama, but there was a little bit in this press conference today that had me really questioning it. First of all, does anybody really think that this NSA reform would have happened if Ed Snowden hadn't leaked the whole thing out to the...
Absolutely not.
Didn't he campaign on that issue? Oh, that's right, he didn't, did he? I mean, but this is just, it is a cover for him to come out and say that that's the reason, not the reason why. Snowden did what he did. We've all disagreed on the set, I've said that before. But at the end of the day, he's reacting at this point. He should have got out in front of this and admitted what it was.
And that, you know, he got into the question about whether this vindicates Snowden, but clearly there was a rationale for what Snowden did if it led the president to institute reforms. Hey, I'm revealing information about this program that people find so abhorrent that we're going to have reforms on it. Does this change your mind at all about Ed Snowden?
No, I think Ed Snowden from the beginning, I knew where he was coming from. I think the president's admission that he's not a patriot is definitely a step in the right direction, and his invitation to bring Snowden back to stand trial if he thinks he's innocent is probably as good as it's going to get from President Obama.
Why doesn't this president have the guts to stand up and say, what is going on here is wrong. Let's get out in front of this thing. Let's fix it.
What's going on here where?
With the NSA at this point. I mean, in other words, he is saying it's not because of Snowden. Well, don't have to give Snowden credit for it. But he can come out and say there's a major problem going on there. We have to fix it. We have to address it. We have to get out in front of this thing. And he's sort of like saying, well, nah. You know, he's trying to have it both ways.
I just want to be clear. Are you taking a shot at the president here, or do you actually think that there's a problem with the NSA program?
There is a problem within the NSA that has been brought to light in some way, shape, or form, however you want to look at it. But this was not the way to go about doing it. The president should have been aware of what was going on there somehow through his people and so forth, and been able to get out in front at this point. This was talked about in secret meetings of sorts, legal. I mean, I don't mean secret like, oh, covert, but like You had to have clearance to have it be in these meetings. The right questions may have not been asked, but somebody should have been there to say, wait a second, why are we collecting all this data and what's going on here?
Which leads me to the other point in all of this, because the president is saying the American people have to have faith and confidence in this program for this program to work. But how are people going to have faith and confidence in a program when they're not allowed to know about it or not allowed to know about all the details? What's it going to take for you to have faith and confidence in this program?
Well, I don't know that too many people have faith in government, period. So I think the president is just backpedaling at this point, trying to make the best of what he can out of this situation.
But we're talking about the NSA trying to get the jump on terror threats. I mean, if it was President Bush who was giving that press conference today, I have a feeling you guys would be a little bit more enthusiastic about the reforms that were announced in the...
You can't do the hypothetical of, oh, if it was
Sure
different...
I can, I just did.
Well, you can try to do that. It's not going to work here. But the point is that if you lead the right way and you've got the right people in the right positions, certain things don't happen. And this may have not happened under Bush's watch. We don't know. That's a hypothetical you're talking about.
Well, but the program was running during Bush.
But when you're talking about the collection of the data and the trust within the government, what's going on here right now, that becomes the bigger question. You're talking about a president who, whether you like these issues or not, Benghazi and the IRS bring questions of this White House, its leadership, and its management.
And that's what this really comes down to, because when the Snowden story first broke, it was all about trusting the administration. And people who support the president, the current president, probably trust his handling of this kind of information. People who don't trust this president and probably trusted the last one would feel the other way around, that if Bush was still president, I would feel better about this program. How do we break that? Because this program isn't going to be effective until everybody or enough people from both sides trust it.
Well, I think the effectiveness of the program will be what it is, because they're getting data and they're scrubbing this data and they're going through it with the data mining they're doing. Whether or not we like it or trust it is a different debate.
Do you trust President Obama's handling of this data?
I can't say that with certitude.
Would you trust Chris Christie's handling of this data?
I don't think the governor's position and the president's position is too far differing when it comes to looking at these types of programs, because there's so many things that we don't know that go into them.
I would actually, easy answer.
Yeah.
I wouldn't trust this president doing this. I would trust Christie for one simple reason.
Republican?
No. This is a man who leads. He stands up in front, bangs his fist on the table and says, this is what I believe, and goes and gets it done. This president doesn't do this. He leads from behind, and this is another example of where he's not out in front. Even today on the radio, as I was driving in, people were talking about what JFK did with the Bay of Pigs and how he came right out and said, hey, wait a second, we got a problem here. He took a lot of flack for it.
Military invasion.
But he led. But also, that was a day and age when a lot of information wasn't out there, a lot of disinformation and misinformation. He came out, laid it all on the table, and said, let me take my punches, let me get it done right. This president won't even follow a Democrat's lead from decades ago.
Not sure I agree with the point that you're making there. But
You never
but I
agree with my
respect-
points.
I
There's
respect-
nothing new on
but
that.
I'll just close by saying this is the crux of the problem. As long as we have a program in place that whether you trust it or not depends on whether you trust the guy in the White House, that's bad news for a program that gets surveillance information about Americans.
Bad news for a White House.
I think part of the issue is what was happening a week or two ago when we had this discussion with Christie and Rand Paul, discussing the whole idea. Michelle Bachmann putting forth that bill saying it's similar to your mail and people reading the name on your mail but not knowing what's inside. I don't know if I buy that argument.
The best part is that you were referring to Michelle Bachmann with a blank page of paper. All right, we're going to take a break on RFL. Up next, just when you thought it would be a boring race for New York City Comptroller, oh no, things got interesting as Spitzer and Stringer battled it out today.
That might be it. Springer's show might be the way to go next. That's the next debate.
It felt like it. We'll have the highlights next.